Yugi, come on. There's my good boy. Ooh, there's the good boy. All right. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Talk on Things and Stuff, where we're going to do an open mic episode. We didn't get a chance to get some callers in yesterday, and I know because several of them sent me some messages. They wanted to call in and say a little bit about what's on their mind. So I figured we'd just devote a whole episode to taking calls and just kind of seeing what is out there. So with that being said, I have Yu-Gi-Oh here keeping me company. And let's go ahead and open up some phone lines. So if you would like to call and share a little bit about what's on your mind, you can dial 210-422-2222. I think I have things set up. There was a problem with the line level on the audio yesterday, so I'm hoping that I have the stuff better balanced today. So if you call in, we'll be able to hear you. And let me see, I'm going to go ahead and get a screen popped up, because occasionally, as you saw yesterday, you'll have people who want to bring up certain scriptures or certain references, and it's always good to have that available. If we go to, what do we got, a new tab on that, and we'll hit share. Okay, so this way I have, we'll just bring it up. Oh, wrong keyboard, okay. All right. Okay, go back to this. So, in the meantime, what do we got going on? Well, one of the things that I've wanted to do is occasionally in the future, when I run out of my past podcast or blog episodes to discuss, then I did a thing called the Mormon Meme Translator. And they're just little snippets, but they are starting points for discussions about some of the deeper things that go on in the kind of core essential ideas that go along with memes. So we can start just taking a look at that. If Yu-Gi-Oh will let me actually type. Yu-Gi-Oh, I've got to be able to type. Come on. All right. Let's see here. Mormon Meme Translator. What do we got? Here we go. There's 2 episodes. All right. So again, this is just filler right now. If you would like to call in and share a little bit of what's on your mind, you can dial the number 210-422-2222. Let me go ahead and get this muted. That's good enough. Boop, boop, boop. All right. In the meantime, we'll just take a look at Mormon Meme Translator. All right. Anyone on social media is confronted daily with meme images. These cute or inspirational images impart a small package of wisdom, which is easily spread from person to person. So what is a meme? A meme is an idea, behavior, or style that spreads from person to person within a culture. A meme acts as a unit for carrying cultural ideas, symbols, or practices that can be transmitted from one mind to another through writing, speech, gestures, rituals, or other imitable phenomena with a mimic theme. Apparently my blog has got a plugin that's now missing, so some of the stuff that used to be better formatted is no longer formatted well. If you have any faithful Mormons in your social network, then chances are you have come across memes which take their source from the wisdom of LDS general authorities. Mormon meme. A meme circulated on social media in the form of an image with an inspirational message attributed to a Mormon church authority on the background of an inspirational photograph. Over the past few years, Mormon memes have been created and distributed both by unofficial sources as well as from the church media departments officially. It's now a tradition that over General Conference weekend, new memes are created, posted, and distributed before conference is even over. Pay attention in the upcoming General Conference, and you'll see that many of the memes have been given professional graphic design treatment that would lead you to believe that the quotes were pre-selected and anticipated to be socially viral and prepared prior to the airing of conference. This is not nefarious, but rather an excellent aspect of message marketing. Some Mormon memes are inspirational and healthy, and they may give us confidence and help us to appreciate the beauty of the world or find inner strength to overcome adversity, such as this one. Have a positive attitude, believe in yourself, face challenges with courage. Other memes may seem to be positive and uplifting, but actually contain a message which can be psychologically manipulative and or harmful. Now, this sounds like an alarmist, exaggerated claim, so just hear me out. Someone else's problem. First, consider that there are other organizations that want to keep their membership blind to their group's past and bound to psychological dependency on the group. Let's take this meme from the Jehovah's Witnesses as an example. Here we have a picture of a family looking out at a dreary landscape, what seems to be an apocalyptic destruction, and then on the bottom, there's a peaceful image with a blue, cool color tone rather than the red, dark, fiery one, and a quote from the scriptures that says, "Whenever it is that they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction is to be instantly upon them." A quote from 1 Thessalonians 5:3, and then jw.org. Now, this meme has messaging both in imagery and the text. It introduces elements of fear for the end of the world, fear for losing your family, and fear of false information about peace and security being given from world leaders. The uncertainty and fear about these impending events puts a form of psychological pressure on the faithful viewer. Jehovah's Witnesses hold that their belief in their governing body of 7 men, which are the sole channels of God's, Jehovah's will on earth. Only by keeping faith and obedience to this organization are members able to feel safe and secure from the coming Armageddon, which is always just around the corner. With this in mind, it's possible to see how a meme like this has the effect of psychologically manipulating members to maintain belief and conformity in the organization's teachings. The JW organization is going through a very similar experience as the Latter-day Saints, in that members have unprecedented access to historical records and publications from the church. And when members are exposed to this information, which they've never had access to before, many of them leave the organization because of the group's strong position on shunning. Former Jehovah's Witnesses pay a much higher price than even Mormons do when they resign or are disfellowshipped. What could an organization going through this type of crisis do to stem the tide of members finding information on the internet, interpreting it themselves, and withdrawing their consent to remain a member of the group? This meme, also from a Jehovah's Witness source, is one approach. And you've got a pleasant picture of flowers and the quote, "Trust in Jehovah with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding." And that's a quote from Proverbs 3:5. Now, in order to perceive the full impact of this meme on the minds of faithful witnesses, you have to understand that trust in Jehovah is synonymous with trust in the governing body, the Watchtower Society, and its official publications and the hierarchy of the leadership down to the local level. With that in mind, this meme primes witnesses to disregard any of their own assessment of information they come across about their own church history. Instead, they must defer only to those sources of information and interpretations that come from the official organization itself. In essence, the witness is told to disregard their own mental faculties, personal judgment, and conscience in favor of what the leaders tell them. To anyone outside the group, this is very clearly a form of control of information. People who study the psychological manipulations employed by groups that exert undue influence over their members call this tactic milieu control. This strategy is employed by such groups to limit the information members are exposed to, which would otherwise contradict the claims of the group. Mormon meme translator. So, here we've seen 2 different examples of how memes can be both positive and helpful to the individual, as well as very efficient bundles of psychological manipulation which serve to bind members to the influence of a demanding organization. The remarkable thing about examining this technique is that once you know about them, you tend to detect them more readily, and their ability to exert control over you is lessened. This is a good thing. What does this have to do with Mormon memes? Well, now that we've seen some clear examples from outside Mormonism, it's interesting to go back and examine Mormon memes to see if any similar tactics are employed. And yes, they show up in Mormon memes frequently. I have created a new project called Mormon Meme Translator, which takes hurtful or manipulative memes and strips away the flowery language and emotional triggers and lays bare what the actual messaging is. With each translation, a brief discussion about the tactic employed by the meme is presented. You can visit the Facebook page for Mormon Meme Translator. The memes will be added on a daily basis there, and then batches of memes and their translations will be combined into periodic posts here at Thoughts on Things and Stuff. So without further ado, let's look at the first batch. Okay, so that's the introduction to just this whole concept of Mormon memes. And again, this is just something to say and to present while we wait for anyone that shares or wants to share what's on their mind. Calls, you can call at 210-422-2222. I just noted that since I'm wearing a black t-shirt, I look like a floating head. So you've got a floating head from outer darkness. Whoa, that's weird. All right, so here we go. Let's see here. Meme 1, Truth Filter. This one was popular. I think this was one of the memes that first inspired me to do this. All right, so we've got a picture of a young child looking at a laptop and examining the computer against a gray background. And the text overlying it says, "We might remind the sincere inquirer that the internet does not have a truth filter. Some information, no matter how convincing, is simply not true." From Neil L. Anderson. And this is an official meme put out by DeseretNews.com. Now, this Mormon meme from Deseret News contains a quote from Neil Anderson, one of the junior apostles in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Now that you are familiar with the concept of milieu control, you can see how the message of this meme is conceptually identical to that of the last Jehovah's Witness meme we examined. A first-level translation of the meme would produce the following results. Now, the format of the Mormon Meme Translator is that I would take out the text of the meme, and then I would replace it in little editorial brackets with the information or a translation of what that meme is really trying to say without flowery language. And in this case, that is only trust information that you receive directly from the church. Now, keep in mind that a lot of these memes actually have multiple layers and multiple things that they're conveying, and so there may be multiple translations. Now, this idea that you should only trust information that comes directly from the church is the practical effect of the original meme. Since there's no truth filter on the internet, then how can you trust anything you read on the internet, even if it sounds absolutely convincing? Some information is simply not true. The safest thing has to be to only believe or expose yourself to information coming from the official church, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, consider the fact that large amounts of the information that would be categorized as anti-Mormon is actually just stuff taken from early church publications. On the other hand, that would make it more convincing, which would mean that it was simply not true. In the end, trusting only information that you get from church leaders isn't the core idea of this meme. The most significant message encoded in this meme is as follows, and this is the second translation. Do not trust your personal judgment, mental faculties, or conscience. You see, what if you come across information that does come from early leaders in official church sources, for example, Brigham Young teaching that Adam was God, or that blood atonement was a way to compensate for a not quite infinite atonement of Christ, which are both found in the Journal of Discourses, which enjoyed official church endorsement at the time of its publication. What are you to do then? Well, if you trust that information is true because it came from the church itself, then your personal judgment and conscience may tempt you to conclude that there is no way that such teachings could come from a legitimate prophet of God. Then you might deduce that if Brigham was only a pretended prophet, then all subsequent prophets cannot claim anything more than this. Then it might make you go back and reevaluate Joseph Smith himself to see if he also did things that no true prophet would do, such as marry other men's wives or incorrectly translate figures from Egyptian papyri into the Book of Abraham. These are not safe conclusions for the church. They don't want members to come to these conclusions. This is why the real message of this meme is that members should not trust their personal judgment, mental faculties, or moral compass. Those things are the very things that make some information on the internet seem very convincing and lead to such uncomfortable conclusions. No. The faithful member must simply remind themselves that since some absolutely and unequivocally convincing evidence is simply not true, they must only turn to the current leaders as a source of reliable information and interpretation of events. Now, as we previously discussed, this is textbook milieu control. It is the exact same thing that Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, Christian Sciences, Moonies do to keep their members devoted and bound to their respective organizations and leaders. A legitimately true church, which allowed freedom of thought and conscience from its members, would not deal in such manipulative and evasive messaging. They wouldn't have to. This is how the Jehovah's Witnesses do it, and here's an example. Let's see here. Boop.
These are my people. So don't be bogged down in these apostates, and be careful on the internet. We were talking about that this weekend with friends. Oh, my word, how many times do I have to tell you, be careful? You know, going here, going there, they'll suck you in. See, with some of this stuff, it can seem so innocent. We're just warning you that all we can do is admonish. Stick with what we have authorized. You'll be safe. You want to go out there, it's at your spiritual risk.
So that's just an example of the type of messaging that the leaders of the Jehovah's Witness give. Again, warning of the dangers of the internet because there's no truth filter. You can't trust it. Now, is this the only way that members are encouraged to close their minds to the facts and conclusions of history? Not quite. And that brings us to meme number 2. And we'll pause right here. I don't want to have this take up the entire episode because I need things to fill in later shows. But that's just kind of the introduction to the concept of milieu control and how it can be employed and conveyed through fancy internet memes. So in the meantime, what is on your mind? If you'd like to call in, 210-422-2222. Let's see, what else do we got here? Any comments? Brendan says, I think Mormons and followers of Joseph Smith think he was original, but I'm pretty sure it was all just plagiarized. Certainly, the more we learn about contextual sources that contained some of Joseph Smith's information, you can see that, some people call it plagiarism. I think we have Terrell Givens, which has used the word bricolage to describe it, which is that you take little bits and pieces from the cultural and religious and theological context around you, and you piece them together to create a new entity. And I think people that look at creativity in general will say that there are very few things that are truly original, and people take things from their context and bring them together into something that is new, even if it's composed of bits and pieces taken from different sources. And so you could justify, even if you detect plagiarism, you could justify what Joseph Smith did by just calling it this type of thing. But, that's just one way to go about it. All right, so let's see. Death Valley Days says, floating head from outer darkness meets the evil apostate. I keep getting messages that evil apostate needs to have more of a presence here. It's one of those things that it's hard to do. It just has to spark joy, and it doesn't happen too frequently. So, all right. Well, without any calls, we can go ahead and go to the second meme. This is I'm gonna have to go and redo the graphic and turn it from open mic into Mormon memes number 1. All right, here we go. Let's see here. Boop. All right. Oh, well, hold on a second. We do have a question. Let's see here. Is it ever hard to be outspoken about controversial Mormon stuff? Does it ever take a toll? Let's see. That's an ironic question coming from John Dehlin, because I think if you followed John Dehlin's record and history and the conversation around him, there's a whole lot of controversy around him. There's no shortage of people willing to criticize and to kind of shoot the messenger, both from within and without the church. I think the difficulty that comes with being outspoken about controversial Mormon stuff is, well, we'll get to that because I have to prioritize calls. But that's a very good question, and it's worth discussing. Hello, this is Talk on Things and Stuff. Can you hear me?
Is this Jonathan Streeter?
It is.
This is John Dehlin.
Oh, hey, John. It's great to hear from you. This is great. I don't have
Are we
to.
live?
Yeah, we are live. So
Hey,
I hope
good morning.
everyone can hear
Good
you. I
morning.
think our. Good morning. How are you doing, and what is on your mind?
I'm doing great. I'm calling in to sing your praises. Yesterday, I was wanting to learn more about just about church history and specifically Joseph Smith's polygamy, and I stumbled on this amazing episode you did with Bill Reel, and I think is it Christopher Smith?
Yes, you're probably referring
on
to the Nancy Rigdon.
Yeah, the Nancy Rigdon happiness letter, and I just thought that's one of the most important, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours I think that's come out of the Mormon universe in the past 15 years, and you were a really important part of that. And I'm just calling to say I think you do amazing work. I think you're a legend. I think you're underknown and underseen, not in any insulting way. I mean, you've got a great following, but I think you need to have 10 times the following you do, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. That was a really fun project to work on. I think when I first heard of the context of the happiness letter, I felt like, oh, I need, this is such an important thing because of all the different types of psychological manipulation that are contained in it, but then you can't evade it coming from Joseph Smith himself. And so I felt like it was just really important to do that. And then, just in doing the research for it, you learn about all of the context around it, and it just gets more and more revealing of the true nature of Joseph Smith. And at the end, all you can really do is just stand in awe at the moral courage and strength of Nancy Rigdon herself. And so I'm very happy to hear that it was positively received.
Yeah, and if anyone within the sound of my voice has not checked that out, you need to Google Thoughts and Things and Stuff. Nancy Rigdon Happiness Letter. There's a really great series of images that you edited on top of the conversation that really add to it, and it's just great work. So thank you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it very much so. Now, the question that you asked here, I think is really relevant. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it in terms of how the challenges that come with being outspoken about controversial Mormon stuff and the toll that it can take on you personally. I can't, I've had my own little bumps here and there where I've gotten the entire Mormon and ex-Mormon community pretty much mad at me, calling me a white supremacist and a racist, if you remember that episode. And
Yeah.
and I know that it's always heartbreaking to see the accusations and things that are thrown at you when I can very much relate to your sincere desire to just be able to have these conversations, knowing that they're uncomfortable and they can make people uneasy. How have you dealt with it? I mean, you're a mental health professional, so I'm sure you just, look in a mirror and engage in self-therapy.
Oh well, I mean, it helps to it helps. I think having a family, I'm close to my family. I think that helps a lot. I think over time you really do develop a thicker skin. You learn to ignore things. There's a lot of fear that if I was watching the debate last night, and it's interesting how sometimes people can make stuff up or make accusations, and you can just be really fearful that anyone can just say anything and then take you down. But over time, I guess what I've noticed is that if you're creating value for people, and if you really do your best just to be kind and honest and hardworking, that there'll be, the people will see. I guess so far it seems like the people that matter will be able to sift out the things that aren't true, the things that are made up, the things that are just there to try and take you down. They'll sift those things out. And it's okay, because also we don't want to create new prophets and new gurus, right? And so
Yeah.
in some sense, I'm grateful for criticism, because the last thing we need are anyone being holy or anyone being viewed as sacrosanct, right? But
Yeah.
so far, it hurts, but I think maybe you'll agree that there are loyal people that are supportive and that find value in your work, and that's what keeps you going, right?
Yeah.
Is it? But let me ask you this in a different way. Taking the criticism off for a second. Sometimes I feel like, obviously, since the church is really good at singing its praises, the work that we do is more focused on showing the hard stuff, on showing the damaging stuff, the critical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is that keeps me sometimes, my brain, in a space where I'm always, not always, but I'm regularly kind of as a day job trying to find, show the problems, show the critical stuff, or criticize, right?
Yeah.
And that's not always it's hard for that not to bleed into the rest of your life if you're always thinking about those sorts of things. So I'm just wondering if that ever takes a toll on you. I know that your day job is like saving lives, so maybe it's different for you.
Well, actually, there's a little bit of analogy with my day job, in that I'm a radiologist, and so my job is to look at images of people who are ill and try to find the bad stuff, and try to make sense of their symptoms and everything. And so I kind of look at the type of work that you and I do as, I think it's understandable that people who are defensive about the church would point the finger at us and say, look, you're just trying to find fault. You can look at anything and find fault. You're ignoring all of the good stuff. And from the perspective of a radiologist, I might look at a chest x-ray and there might be a whole bunch of healthy lung all over the chest x-ray, but there's a big cancer in, a one part of the lung. And I'm not doing the patient any favor if I ignore the cancer. And so there's an important role. And then the severity and the nature of that cancer has tremendous implications for the overall health of the patient. And the same is true in Mormonism and the organization itself. But I can particularly relate to the psychological weight of adopting a mindset that is simply critical. And I think I've taken some time off of creating a lot of content to step back and really examine the nature of the type of criticism that I do, and make sure that I'm doing it in a way that, even though it may sound criticism and negativity from somebody who's only in a defensive mode regarding the church, what it really is a development of a moral framework that people can have for examining not just the church, but relationships, other organizations and societies, just to try to do these things. So I think anytime we approach these, we approach them with a particular moral framework, and we're pointing out where there's a contradiction between this type of moral framework that we have and what is happening in the church. And the reason that is important, because I think there can be a tendency to go into a mode of criticism that is simply for the sake of criticism. And this is where you lose the charity, because I think we still have to employ an element of charity when we examine the church. So if Tad Walsh or a general authority says something that could be interpreted in a very deplorable way, or it could be you extend charity to them and say they don't really mean that, or maybe they just don't understand that, I think it does us, it's more helpful and more credible to us if we allow that charity to extend. And so the most recent example of that is the D. Todd Christofferson issue about fruit, the bitter fruit. I think if you want to take that statement and interpret it in the worst possible way, you can do that. And you'll have great fodder to create memes and to really point the finger of scorn at the church. They love talking about the finger of scorn. And you'll get lots of points in the ex-Mormon community, but what you'll lose is the credibility that you're someone who really is trying to understand what people are saying and take them at their word. And there's plenty to point out in the church that is a problem that people can grow beyond without having to resort to that level of criticism. And I say that because I think that's a tendency that we are starting to see, not just in the world of Mormonism, but in the world all around us. There's been a lot of discussion of the nature of the types of conflict that go on in social media and our world of cancel culture. And if you just step back and look at how those things happen, this principle of allowing you to have an element of charity and how you interpret people's word is being lost. And it's being lost on a philosophical basis. And so if you go back and you look at the ideas that have been integrated into something called critical theory and a critical outlook of the world, one of the things that you'll hear is a principle is something called the death of the author. And when you look at the postmodern philosophical underpinnings of critical theory, one of the ideas is that our entire world is something that is constructed through the matrix of language and meaning. And so language itself is the highest principle because the only way that we have to understand our world and to communicate each other is with language. And so if you can take whatever you interpret from the language is reality. And so the death of the author means that when somebody creates something, a book, a movie, a podcast, you can examine the words that are put out there and then what you interpret from those words, how they make you feel, your lived experience of those words is the only thing that matters. The intent of the author does not matter. That's why they say the author is dead. Now, if you take that idea and extend it to its logical conclusion, you can see that it totally removes this principle of charity because I no longer have to examine whether or not somebody meant something that I interpreted. All I have to do is take the worst form of interpretation and run with it and demonize them, point the finger, and cancel them. And that idea, I think, is completely anathema to actually living with people who have diversity of thought, who want to be able to express things in an open way in society. And I think it kills communities. And so when I see that happen in even things like the Mormon Stories podcast community and everything, it's really difficult for me because you almost can't argue against it because then you get accused of defending hate and bigotry and because somebody interpreted something someone said that way. It's just really toxic. And so I'm trying to look at the way that I criticize the church and discuss with other people and make sure that I don't fall into those things because they're very alluring. It's very tempting to say, I gotcha, and then just go with it.
Yeah, and then you create these silos of sort of self-reinforcing, feedback, this closed feedback loop. And in some ways, you risk becoming the thing that you're running from, which you never want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really relate to the fact that you're thinking about this and you thought so much about this. But I just love, I do think you're able to bring an intellectual, scholarly, kind of critical approach and even a compassionate, fair approach to what you do. And I just really admire it. And that's why I called today to just blow sunshine into your world a little bit if I can.
Well, I appreciate that. It's always great to hear from you, John. And certainly I've been
Will you
very...
keep up the good work?
Absolutely, and I've been very excited to see your new project with short, tight videos on specific themes. I think we've needed something like that for a long time, and whoever you have as your team helping you create content and edit stuff, if it's not just you yourself, you guys are doing a great job, and kudos to everybody who's working on that. Those are always fun to look at.
Well, those who follow me know that I've given you public credit because you taught me about a lot of the software. You even gave me a little tutorial on cameras and lighting. And then I found a guy that worked with me to implement your recommendations. So I have you to thank for. You remember just a month or two ago, right?
Yeah.
We had that phone call, and you were so.
Yeah, that was me calling you and being critical of you. I'm like, John, you can't have Robert Rittner on there and have your studio look like that.
That was awful. So yeah, I upped my game and
oh man, you far exceeded it. I'm so jealous every time I see one of your things go live. I'm like, man, that tight focus and the blur background, that looks really good. I got this black. I'm in my closet, so I have to make it black so that you can't see all my shirts and crap.
Well, it literally wouldn't have happened without you, Jonathan. So hey, let me ask you one last question.
Sure.
What can us listeners do to support your work? How can we support your work?
I don't know. I think for me, it's not. it's weird. I have this podcast that I do periodically called The Three Apostates, and it's with a former Jehovah's Witness and a former Scientologist. And
That's on
you know,
YouTube. That's on YouTube, right?
yeah, if you just Google The Three Apostates, you'll see several episodes where we just kind of compare things. But one of the discussions there is comparing just how we approach our channels. And both of them, their podcasting is their primary source of income. It's their primary gig. And so I think they are much more tied into Patreon, tied into YouTube's new monetization thing. And it really matters to them when YouTube does something like demonetize a video. For me, it's where this is just like a hobby that I do. And, I think the most, if you subscribe to the channel, then that gets me more subscriptions, and that will give me a bigger footprint if there's people that are interesting that maybe are marginally connected to Mormonism, but I'd like to invite them on the show to talk about some things that have implications for us, then I think it'll be more likely if I have a higher subscription base for that they would go along with it. So that's really the only thing, is
So click on
subscribing
the
and sharing.
subscription. And I subscribe. What I learned is that there's a difference between the subscription button and the alert me kind of button,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you've got to.
It's one thing to subscribe, but if they also click that little bell or whatever it is, then they're notified when like a show like this comes on, and then they can watch it simultaneously, which is really fun.
Yeah. And I'm terrible at social media. I should be starting and ending every episode with, go ahead and hit the subscription button and set the bell to all. That way you'll get every notification. But I don't. I always forget to do that.
Well, to quote my friend Spock, I hope you live long and prosper, Jonathan Streeter, and I hope you give us many, many years to come of amazing content and analysis and wisdom. And I hope you you can stop at any time if it's good for your life to stop. But I hope you don't.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the words of support, John.
Keep it up, brother.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Okay. So I hope the audio levels on that was pretty good. It's always great to hear from John. Certainly he and the Mormon Stories Foundation and all the various podcasts that are appendages to that are, very important and influential in the minds of many people who reason and rationalize and climb their way out of the state of indoctrination that can characterize people in the church. When you grow up and that's the only world that you know. All right, so the phone lines are open again. If you would like to call 210-422-2222, you can join in the conversation. Yu-Gi-Oh is being a big old butt and trying to struggle. Okay, go. All right. Okay, so let's see what we have. All right, so SH says, anyone else really struggling in a mixed faith marriage? My in-laws make it all the more challenging. This is something that I can really only imagine. When I made my way out of the church, my wife at the time and I kind of studied together. She came at it from the perspective of feminism, and I came at it from the perspective of kind of a different moral framework, and it was hard to do, but there's more to be said on that. Okay. Hello, you're on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the church has ever given any explanation as to why in Jacob 2, it says that the Lord saw polygamy even with the ancients as abominable. I can't remember exactly how it's worded. But
you're talking about the... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I anticipate that what you're saying is, why is it that in the Book of Mormon, God seems to condemn polygamy, and yet Joseph Smith practices it with a seeming revelation there? Why is that contradiction not a revelation?
Exactly. But not only that, but if you read in section 132, his reasoning for he actually goes to the Lord and asks him about why the ancients practiced polygamy when he had just translated or whatever,
Hmm.
that the Lord found that abominable. And I wonder if the church has ever come up with an explanation of why he even asked, because he'd already received that.
I think
supposedly.
that, yeah, I think the church does have an explanation. And what you'll hear most frequently when you point out this apparent contradiction is they'll say, well, if you read the context, then what he really says is that it's an abomination unless the Lord commands it. And then it is a dispensation commandment from the Lord, and so it's okay. And so that is kind of how DNC 132 contextualizes it as well, is that, you know, things that may be forbidden in one instance are completely right when the Lord commands it. And we just had John Dehlin talk about the Nancy Rigdon happiness letter, and if you go and read that letter, you'll see
Yeah.
that this is a core aspect of the letter. In fact, it's the main message of the letter, because Nancy Rigdon, perhaps like yourself, was confronted with this contradiction of everything that I've understand about marriage and morality would say that the prophet asking me to be his plural wife secretly without the knowledge of his wife or with the knowledge of his wife contradicts the old traditional morality and values. Why would a prophet ever say that? And so when you read the letter, you can see how slick, frankly, and manipulative Joseph Smith is in subverting her conventional morality by inserting
Right.
the idea that while it may be wrong in one instance, if the prophet of God tells you it's okay, then it is okay. And not only is it okay, but if you refuse, then you're going to be punished. And it's kind
Right.
of mild in the happiness letter, where it's just taken the form of blessings that will be held from you. But when you read DNC 132, it's absolutely Emma Smith will be destroyed. And so that's
Yeah.
the paradigm that you use.
And I loved that episode. I listened to the Nancy Rigdon, the happiness letter episode. That was fantastic. In fact, she is my screensaver now. I found
Oh,
her
that's
as
great.
my
I love
screensaver.
hearing that.
She is one courageous woman. But
She really is.
it says right here, this is at the beginning of section 132, and it says, "Verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, my servant Joseph, that inasmuch as you have inquired of my hand to know and understand wherein I, the Lord, justified my servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," talking about polygamy. But then he'd already received that answer. You see what I'm saying? Why
Yeah,
would he even?
well, I mean, I think you can reasonably say, well, wait a second, he's inquiring of it. And I think when you look at the history, they're saying, well, he was inquiring of it while he was doing the Joseph Smith translation, and he came across passages referring to multiple wives in the case of some of the early patriarchs, and that's what spawned this question. But then if you look at the timeline, like when he was doing that translation, it was considerably after the Fanny Alger affair. And so
Yeah,
if,
yeah,
you know, if it just, I think when you dive into these dates and the chronology, you'll see that there's a whole lot of post hoc rationalization and just introducing uncertainty about the timeline just to do something that is a bit
right,
thought stopping on the part of any faithful member. If you just say, well, and then you read the heading of 132 now, they'll say, well, he knew about these principles as early as, let's see, when was the first time he engaged in extramarital relations? The 30s. Okay, as early as the early 1830s. You know, and
right,
you have to post date it back as far enough, and then just assume, because if he was a prophet and he was engaging in these plural marriages with 16-year-old housemaids or whatever, then he must have known about it by the time. Otherwise, it'd be adultery, and of course, the prophet won't do that.
well, that's one way of looking at it. But
Yeah.
anyway, I know what conclusion I have drawn. But I just wondered if the church had any explanations as to why he was even asking about that.
Yeah,
When he
and to my
already,
knowledge, the
yeah,
asking is having to do the official story now is that when he was translating the Bible for the inspired translation and came
okay.
across those passages,
He just
that
came
was the
across
thing.
it again, right? Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Again,
all
well,
right,
you know, you're right, because you'd be like, well, let's see, when I translated the Book of Mormon and I came across that point, then I kind of had a good idea there of what it should be.
yeah, that it shouldn't be practiced, and he even condemned it with the ancient prophets. And so, why ask again? I just that just doesn't make sense to me. But and I wondered
Yeah.
if anyone had given any explanation. But
No, I mean, and
anyway,
then if you dig deeper, like they're not just talking about plural marriage, they're also talking about concubinage. And we
Right.
kind of just gloss over that, but concubinage is when you have a woman who's sexually available to you, sort of like a mistress, but you're not really married, but you keep them. And if you look people that study kind of the different modes that prostitution held in frontier West, there's actually different types of that, and that kept woman is a particular type of type. In ancient times, they would call it a concubinage. And if you look at some of the menace of early church leadership, I think it's Wilford Woodruff, who the subject of concubinage comes up and they're discussing it. And he's like, yeah, the Lord may say concubinage is okay. And just the knowledge that that idea exists in the church history in some sense is very mind-blowing, because it frees up the people who accept that as binding on them, a lot of flexibility in how they can characterize the way that they prey upon vulnerable women.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your input. And
All right. Thanks for the call.
enjoy your show. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay. Okay, so on the point of if you're struggling with a mixed faith marriage, all I can do is recommend highly to you the, I think it's called Marriage on a Tightrope podcast with Alan Mount and his family, who have really worked through this, and they have some great content on how to deal with it. Hello, you're on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Yeah, with that last caller, she was talking about the polygamy with you. What's even more fascinating is the fact that Joseph Smith wrote in the Times and Seasons, like 9 to 11 days before he died, that anyone caught practicing polygamy would be excommunicated on the spot. So there just seems to be so much contradiction and so many inconsistencies,
Yeah, and that contradiction has really fueled a lot of people who are really trying to reinvent Joseph Smith as a more honorable man in the way that they view him. So when you go back and look at the remnant movement, who seem to be very inspired by the words and writings of Denver Snuffer, they're very skeptical about whether or not Joseph Smith actually did practice polygamy. And certainly the RLDS Church, now the Community of Christ, early in its history, rejected the idea that he did. And so I think when you look at the people who have seen the contradictions between what we accept of the reality of his secret polygamy with his public statements, as you point out, if you only look at the public statements, then it would seem like he absolutely condemned it and he never accepted it. But then when you look at the private things, the things that were kept hidden, secret, and off the records that then witnesses explained later, it's hard to controvert it, but you're left with how do you reconcile the two? It's just like if you go and you look at the prisons, you're going to find a lot of people proclaiming their innocence. And it's only secretly that they would admit any guilt, and they're never going to write it down or anything. And so you have to deal with, the fact that if you're engaged in things that are both criminal, immoral, and would betray your position in the society created around you, chances are you're going to keep that really secret and private.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Denver Snuffer movement. Those guys have they almost seem to be going off into like conspiracy theories, like, oh, Brigham Young was involved in Joseph's assassination, and he was the only prophet, and everyone else is not up until now. And it's they talk about how they were funded by the Rothschilds. You get into kind of those murky territories, but not really based on actual verifiable evidence. But yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah. The irony of that movement that's like, no, Denver Snuffer is not our prophet. And then you go to their first conference and there's this moment where one of the representatives is holding up these metal plates upon which they have laser engraved the words of Denver Snuffer so that it can withstand the apocalypse. It's like, I don't know if you guys are straight up about not revering him as a prophet.
A lot of them are saying he's not, because I've talked to ones who are straight up saying he is. So I guess they're trying to be discreet about it. I don't know.
Well, I think, we're in the world now where you can create esoteric definitions of words and then deny or approve things in a particular context to whatever serves you well. So, if when it serves you well to deny that Denver Sniffer is a prophet, then you can say, well, he's not like a prophet. Everybody's a prophet. So if everybody's a prophet, then no one's a prophet. And so it's just,
Right.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, and then something else that was on my mind was the what was his name? Bill Reed on his the Mormon Discussion podcast, Elevation Emotion. I remember I saw the episode he did with John Dehlin, and really how the Holy Ghost and a lot of certain promptings or quote revelations are maybe could also be seen as, I guess, one's own self-delusion.
Yeah, you're talking about Bill Reel's discussions about elevation emotion, and I think some of the videos out there where they show different religious figures talking in very much the same way that we're accustomed to hearing people talk about their testimony in fast and testimony meeting, using those emotions and the feeling of spiritual connectedness or elevation that they have, binding them to their particular religions. It's kind of one of those instances where you see it as just these groups taking advantage of some of the psychological levers that, for whatever evolutionary reason, we have in our brains, and then attaching a mythology of truth to it, saying if you feel this way, then it means that it's true, and using that as a way to bind them for it. It's very effective because we're all affected by it.
Yeah, I'm no longer part of the church. It's been a couple of years now, but I realized when I discovered a lot of this that I, quote unquote, felt the Spirit when I heard and sang the Star Spangled Banner. So it's a very similar feeling.
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt it when I listened to Aragorn's speech before the charge on Minas Tirith in the Lord of the Rings, when he said, "For Frodo." And, when I was in the Air Force, and when I went to 2 months of Air Force Indoctrination Academy, and at the end, the movie Air Force One was in the theater, and we all went to watch it together, and the President of the United States is under threat, and he's vindicated, and he's like, yeah! All of those things, just whether it's appealing to your patriotism, appealing to your compassion, your empathy. We did an episode a few weeks ago about the lies that bind, and in one of those episodes we took these, I think they're Thailand commercials about life insurance or something, but those things are so carefully crafted to tap into our emotional resonance on themes of family and compassion and everything. You just cannot help but just sob. Like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I know, I've seen these commercials, and I'm just like crying in the episode because it's just so powerful, and these emotions are predictably manipulated. And that's why they are so prevalent in the way that these groups control people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I know exactly what you're saying. Thank you so much for taking my call. I love your channel, and I love what you do. So I hope you keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. So if you'd like to join the conversation, the phone lines are open again, 210-422-2222. To finish out the thought of last time, Marriage on a Tightrope with, I think it's Alan and Katie Mount. It's part of the Mormon Discussions podcast family. If you just Google Mormon Discussions, you'll be able to find it. Great resources there. Hello, you're on Talk on Things and Stuff.
Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. What's on your mind?
It's a great show. I just was wondering what your thoughts were on, some of the recent LGBTQ events with the Pope changing the stance of the Catholic Church on approving civil unions, and what effect that will have, and how the Brethren will react to those kinds of things. There's also like a survey out there that the church has put out that is kind of asking different people's opinions on their LGBTQ views, and polling where they think the church's stand is, and if it's right or not. So, do you have any thoughts on
when that news
Brethren respond to that?
Yeah, well, when the news broke, one of the Mormon/ex-Mormon LGBT Facebook pages posted a leaked video of a behind-the-scenes meeting between high-level Catholic regional leaders in the Salt Lake area and the general authorities of the church. And there they talked about what common interests they had in defending religious liberty so that they can continue to practice their beliefs regarding not wanting to accept gay marriage and other LGBT rights. The idea that was put forth in that video, which I don't think had been leaked before. It looked like the same Mormon leak videos that originally happened, I think 2015 or something like that, where they had Elder Gong presenting various themes, but it was something different. It's like I hadn't seen it before, and I'm still making my way through it. But early on in it, the Catholic representative basically says, if they normalize this, we will shut down all of our institutions. And, just think about that. All of the different Catholic charities, assistance, everything, adoptions, if they accept these things, we're just going to shut it all down. And that's a pretty hard line. And I think the church leaders at the LDS level would believe that too. And I think that informs why they fight so hard on this theme of religious liberty, because what they're afraid of is if the government allows these rights to be afforded to people in the LGBT community, then the next shoe that will drop is forcing the church to accept them theologically. And that is the thing that the church doesn't want to do. They don't want to be compelled to do gay marriages in their temple or lose tax-exempt status or something like that. And from the Catholic perspective, I think given the staunch mindset of the people in that group and extend that out to the members themselves, and you can see that's got to be like a really hard thing to change. Now, the benefit of having an authoritarian, top-down, hierarchy-driven religious paradigm, as both the Mormon Church and the Catholic Church has, is that as soon as the revelation or tipping point goes so that the highest leader makes a change, then that, because of this strong follow the leader ethic within the church, that very quickly is able to change the hearts and minds of people. In Mormonism, we saw it when the church finally rescinded the ban on Black people of African descent getting temple blessings and the priesthood. Well, immediately everyone's like, hallelujah. There are still a few holdouts who are like, well, I can't believe I can't be religiously racist no more. I'm gone. And then the church is probably happy to lose those people. And I think you'll probably see the same effect in the Catholic Church, where the people who really do hold the Pope to be the representative of God will just immediately change their heart. And he's instantly carved out new rooms in their heart for them to be more loving and accepting of people in their lives and in society who are different from them in this regard. And you'll still have holdouts. But I think probably the leaders of the Mormon Church are watching very closely, and they're trying to figure out how to implement that eventually. If I was a general authority, I'd probably be kind of like, if I'm alive when we make this change, there's going to be so much egg on my face. Just make sure I'm safely dead before you make this change, okay? So all the older general authorities, we need to be dead when we make this change. Now, the younger apostles, you guys just shut up about it right now. Don't say anything. That way, when you make the change, when you're in charge, there's no egg on your face, okay? That you can blame it on us. That's the only way I could really conceive of doing it. But they've already lived through a lot of egg on their face with the whole reversal of the children of gay people, married gay couples not having baptism. And just like in that case, the members will fall in line. So I don't know. I think it's very interesting times to be in to see those changes happen.
Yeah, it's interesting if they, what I call the sexualization of the celestial kingdom really sometimes in their theological constructs can limit their ability to make those social changes. And so I think they're trying to find the right calculation to introduce a non-monogamous or non-polygamous view of exaltation, because I think that on the one hand, I guess the Catholic Church does have an advantage in that regard, where they don't have that kind of theological entanglement.
No, you make an excellent point there, which is a significant difference in how the argument has been framed theologically, where Catholics don't have people in heaven creating families and infinite offsprings and their own worlds as gods themselves. They are simply living, to my knowledge, pretty much as asexual beings with God in heaven. And in Mormonism, you're very much still a sexual being, and they've tied this to our gender in this life and even said that we had a gender before this life. And so, as you point out, they've got to reformulate that entire theological structure to make it work in the eternities. Now, you could take it as a pattern. People have pointed to the example of penguins. Whenever people say, homosexuality is not natural, then people say, well, hold on a second. If you look at penguin populations, then you have male couples that will take eggs and children from people whose, otherwise mother has died. And so that child would die, but then the male coupled penguins raise the child. And so there's an evolutionary advantage of that. It may actually be very natural and normal and an evolutionary adaptation for there to be a certain percentage in a population that could take on that role. Well, how do you conceptualize that in the afterlife? And I don't know. I mean, I think the whole concept of gender in Mormonism has been malleable and convenient when needed to be. And I think if you look at Taylor Petrie's book on gender in Mormonism, you'll see that the Brethren have been able to play around with the whole idea. The most brilliant example of which is the TK smoothie, where those parts of your anatomy which make up your gender are simply taken away. And if they can be taken away, then perhaps they can be given. And so it's very fascinating to see how they could adapt to it. There's certainly a lot of opportunities for them to do it.
Yeah, I think it's just fascinating the complexity of the position that the church leaders are in to try to navigate this issue. I think is I try to appreciate the difficulty that they have, and I hope that they can find a way to find a path that is way less damaging and shaming to people because of their sexual orientation, because it's hurting a lot of people. And I'm hopeful that sometime in the future, maybe not in the immediate future, but sooner than later, they can find a solution that will bring more love and hope to those people that are being damaged right now.
It's funny because that type of question of how can the Brethren save faith and save face and make progress on this issue, like how can we imagine that they could do that, is one of the questions that I had when I was creating what is being called the hoax apology on the issue of racism. And if you read that, one of my goals was to have the prophet be as prophet-like as possible and do it in a way that could inspire faith and good feelings towards the church and be a way for people to move forward and be proud to be Mormon if the leaders did that. And I got people private messaging me saying, that was really powerful and really good, but we need something like this on the issue of the LGBT people in the church. Can you make something that could pave a way or show an example of how the Brethren could integrate compassion and loving theology in a way that they could move forward in? And it's just, clearly people don't want to hear any more from me in that paradigm. But it's a great question. And I think that type of imagination and creativity and theological resourcefulness is what the leaders need in the people drafting their revelations or whatever. Hopefully they get a general authority who is able to come up with something in a way that allows them to move forward and do so with love. Anyway. All right.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully it doesn't take. Hopefully it doesn't take till Elder Gong becomes a senior apostle to get there, because that's a long ways away. But appreciate
you would think
your thoughts on that and taking my call.
Yeah, you'd think Elder Christofferson would be in the ideal way to do it because he's more senior than Elder Gong, and he has a very high-profile person in his family. And within their family, they've come up with a way that is characterized by love and acceptance. But we're seeing that message and that paradigm is almost being weaponized because it's in contradiction with some of the statements and positions of more senior church leaders. So thank you very much for your thoughts.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, take care. All right, so phone lines are once again open at 210-422-2222. If you would like to call and share a little bit about what's on your mind, we've got a few minutes left. I just want to have let's see here. Okay, I have to do this. So John Dehlin asked, do you ever have, does it ever take a toll when you're being critical of the church? And Sandra Tanner says the answer is yes. So Sandra, if you're still watching, I can very much feel the weight of that answer, because if you're familiar with the history of Sandra and Gerald Tanner, all the different legal battles that they've had with the church, decades ago, early on, uncovering all of the things that we take for granted now that I can just boop, pull up on archive.org or any other thing and I can see the scanned documents. Well, they had to pour through libraries and they had to go and get originals and do all of the hard labor to try to get that information out before the digital age. And in the meantime, their names were completely demonized and smeared in the minds of people in the Salt Lake area who were warned to stay away from them. And I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Sandra and to connect with her in the bookstore, the Lighthouse Ministry bookstore. Very early on, when I had a question of something I was researching, I just looked on the utlm.org website and I saw a phone number and I just called it and she picked up right away. It was so weird. And I asked my question. She didn't know the answer, but she said this guy named Michael Marquardt might. And she put me in connection with Michael Marquardt, and he was just a phenomenal resource. He's so just giving and helpful. The types of connections in the Mormon historian research community are just really friendly. And, as much as people want to be the first to publish one sort of thing, and so they hold their cards close to their chest, they are also so giving and helpful for people that are just tipping their toes into it. So shout out to Sandra Tanner. And if you ever get a chance, you got to stop by and say hi to her. She's so friendly. And Evil Apostate even had an extended interview with her. So if you just Google Evil Apostate Sandra Tanner, you can get a snapshot of how Sandra Tanner deals with improv puppet comedy. It's great. Okay, so phone number again is 210-422-2222. Let's see here. Let's see, Leah Eddington Humberstone says, I've heard members compare polygamy to Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac to the Lord. It has never made sense to me since Abraham did not end up killing Isaac. Do you know where this explanation come from? Did a general authority use it in the past? I think the example of the binding of Isaac is one that you're going to see repeated in any coercive religious group. Because it comes from the Bible, it's not from some proprietary religious text. It's always used as a rationale for the religious leader doing something unethical and immoral because it's a story that endorses moral subversion. We can talk about that later. Hello, you're on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Hey, Jonathan, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Is this Gibby Geezer?
Yes, sir, it is.
Hey, what's on your mind? I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. I'd like to interject if I could. Really great show today. Yeah, you got John Dehlin calling in. See, I told you were a magnificent bastard, John Streeter. Yeah. And the happiness letter. I have watched that video that you did with Bill Reel and the other guy a couple different times. And I think it was interesting that John pointed out that that's damn important. He said something like it's the most important thing in the last 15 years. And it is. It's like a smoking gun. The letter written in Joseph Smith's handwriting. Burn this letter. Oh, keep it close to your bosom. Come when Emma don't come. That's good stuff, Steve.
Well, I have to correct you. It was not written in Joseph Smith's handwriting. It was Willard Richards' handwriting. But there's some controversy over whether Joseph Smith actually authored it. But certainly, majority of historians and church leaders attribute it to Joseph Smith. So I can't let false information be out there.
Oh, my bad. Oh, I thought I was on top of that. Was there something that he did write in his own handwriting?
There is another episode that I did with Radio Free Mormon that is a blessing given to Sarah Ann Whitley, I believe, that is in Joseph Smith's handwriting. And it doesn't directly allude to polygamy, but when you correlate it with some other events, you can see that it is a blessing given in exchange for something that seems to be tied to another person having a sham marriage with Sarah Whitley so that Joseph Smith can do that. And then there's a letter that he writes to her parents saying, I'm in hiding at this place, come and visit me with your daughter, and when Emma's not here, then is the safest time. And that is also in Joseph Smith's handwriting. Yeah.
That's the one I'm getting confused. Also,
and that's the one that says burn this letter.
Okay, that's good stuff too. Yeah, and also you mentioned Sandra Tanner. When I was a couple years ago, when I was really struggling, and I think when you kind of figure out what's going on, because like I said, in past calls, I joined when I was 20. I was in the church almost 40 years, true believing the whole thing. But when you start to learn the truth, I think there's like a little shock to your system. Well, not a little necessarily, but a shock to your system. And it kind of short-circuits you a little bit for a time there. That's what it did for me anyway. That was been my experience. And during that time, I actually called the Lighthouse Ministry. Sandra Tanner picked up, and that dear woman, if you're listening, Sandra, I still love you even to this day. She talked to me and answered some questions I had that were really important to me at the time. I was trying to figure out what the heck. I was one of the people that had felt the Spirit, many times over the years. I was trying to work that out and figure out what it was. And the answer, if anybody else is in the same boat, is emotional elevation. I felt it since then. I felt it listening to a Leonard Skinner song. Yes, I have, by golly. I tell you, I have felt that good feeling.
I will tell you, since you shared that story about you sitting down with your kids and saying, and playing, I think it's like I'm a simple man, or I'm just a simple man, or be a simple.
Yeah, Simple Man. That's a popular one. It's a very nice song.
I went and listened to it, and I just I felt that same emotional resonance as well, and it was such a touching moment to envision you sitting down with your sons and kind of laying that part of your soul bare, and I can imagine that it's both a humbling experience as well as a very meaningful one for them to have their father let go of this paradigm of expectations and perfection that had been so characteristic of it, and just be, just whoever you are is fine, and whoever I am, it's not complicated by all these theological adornments and expectations.
Exactly. You have such a good way of putting stuff, really saying putting it into words. That is exactly correct. And I tell you what, it is very humbling. Even now, I feel a sense of embarrassment and shame. But my kids are awesome. I have two boys. They know, and they're older. They've grown. But they know where all that love was coming from and everything. And my wife is out. They're out. And my mom's in from out of state visiting. And I was talking to them just yesterday and said, without all the church thing, having to look at life through that LDS filter, things are just so much better in our relationship and blah, blah, blah. And I was telling my mom all this, and she goes, without all those rules and everything, because my mom, sweet mother that she is, an angel that walks the earth, she was the only one in the family. I was the only member of my family. She was the one that would come to the little primary presentations and go to church with us now and then. And she never wanted to join or anything, but she was very sweet and polite. So she saw a little bit of it for herself. Yeah. And anyway, so yeah, life is going on, and I just happen to be fascinated with church history because it's really, really very interesting. So anyway, great call today. There's something I wanted to bring up that's been kind of bothering me. I called it a while back when you were doing the voice changer. Your voice sounded like a chipmunk.
Yes.
Remember that? And anyway, I was having problems where you couldn't hear. I was cutting out or something. I don't know. And that call did not go well. And I was noticing afterwards, I was listening through the whole thing, and I was getting hit hard in the comments, actually. And I think the topic of the video was something very close to things ex-Mormons are uncomfortable talking about, which is why you had the voice change scene, right?
Yeah.
So I think my particular comment, which we couldn't do because I kept getting cut out, and you had to paraphrase, it was just that went to hell because of the connection. But I think my call was the most appropriate one for the title of the video, because what I was talking about, And I don't want to get hung up on the Ed Decker and the Godmakers. John Dehlin interviewed Ed Decker, who did the Godmakers, and then there was mention of Godmakers 2. Okay, so I've seen Godmakers. I haven't seen Godmakers 2. I watched it. Yeah, whatever. And but what caught me totally off guard, I've never heard of it, even in the ex-Mormon community. There was some old news footage from the 50s or 60s, but it was way back, black and white. People are picketing in Salt Lake and everything, and it was about Gordon B.
Hinckley.
Yeah, and some other leaders, but it was Hinckley was the one that they specifically talked about. But anyway, the whole thing was that they would go to there was a house in Salt Lake, a fancy house, and Hinckley.
If I recall correctly, to summarize that, because I looked into this when I saw news of it, and there was no, I haven't seen the footage. So what I would recommend that you do is, if you can find the footage, then give me a link to it, and we can take a look at it. But I know accusations of sexual impropriety centered around Gordon B. Hinckley was part of the Godmakers 2, I think. And I believe there was some mistaken identity with someone with a similar name, and it was something that kind of impaired the credibility of Godmakers 2, because, I mean, when you're leveling these types of accusations, making sure that you have sufficient evidence to back everything up is so important, because your credibility is on the line.
Absolutely, and that's why I wasn't commenting, because I think one comment said, this sounds like a 2 a.m. talk show. It's like, no, I'm not talking conspiracies and the prophets meeting with lizard people. No, I'm just saying, and I don't want to besmirch anybody's name. I mean, in my church history, with all my callings, I've sat in disciplinary courts and stuff, and I will go to my grave with personal information that people said. I have a great respect for that type of thing, and I would for Gordon B. Hinckley if he wasn't, if it was him. I don't know. That's why I was kind of, nobody ever wants to talk about it, which is why I was kind of trying to figure out. But if it was him, for instance, only because of his position in the church, he would need to be held accountable. But if he was, just some other guy who had committed adultery or went, off the rails or something, whatever. That's okay, whatever. But you know what I mean? So are you saying that they're saying it's a different Gordon B. Hinckley? Because there were not one witness, but 4 different people who, as far as I could tell, really had nothing to gain unless the producers paid them $50 or something. I don't know. But they were like, yeah, I was in the house. I bought these women in. I'll
tell you what you do is send me links to things that you can find it. I'll do an investigation into it.
I'll send you the link. Yeah, and I'll send you
and we'll see what we can find from it.
Yeah, because it was very disturbing, and it's like, what I thought was, since I love Gordon B. Hinckley. I mean, he's, how you're not going to love him, and a lot of the people that are younger, who are leaving the church, that was their prophet for so long, and I've got good feelings about him and everything. But if that was true, it'd be like, oh, here's another example of corruption, blah blah blah. But I'm not trying to smear Gordon B. Hinckley. It's just and then the thing they said, that the church owned a lot of media. They shoved it on the table. So some people lost their jobs for what little bit that they did produce. That type of thing. So I just like
well, certainly cover-ups meant. Cover-ups meant to shield the public image of high-ranking figures is not unique to Mormonism, but because of this moral dimension where the prophets put themselves out as moral authorities, and there's this theme in Mormonism that your priesthood authority and power is withdrawn the moment that you even go down a path that will lead to that iniquity, is something that you would have to wrestle with if, in fact, a general authority was found to be doing this. And maybe something like that is what is behind some of the high-level general authority excommunications, Elder Hamula. We just don't know. And we're left to speculate, and they are still private citizens, and they have their own right to privacy. It's just difficult when there are also religious leaders that are imposing guilt, shame, and the type of religious discipline that everyone else has to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, Sandra Tanner is giving a comment about, we wrote about the Godmaker 2 problems at our Time CR newsletters, so certainly we'll take a look at whatever links you can provide, and we'll check out the resources at UTLM and try to get to the truth of it.
Okay, excellent. Anyway,
all right.
You are kicking butt and taking names, John Streeter. Thanks for all you do.
All right, take care. Great to hear from you.
Bye.
Okay, well, I think my day job is about to start, so we will close this episode down. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to get to some more of those Mormon meme translations. And until next time, this has been, I have to say it slowly now while I'm getting my stuff lined up, Talk on Things and Stuff. Take care.